Welcome back to the Mr. Manhood podcast. In this episode, we'll be talking about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. I love this story Nipsey Hussle talks about in one of his interviews where he says, I used to think a certain way when I used to live in California, or when I lived in California. And then he outlines this time where he went back to where his dad was from in Africa. And he said he was there for a while, and he said he came back home, and he said the biggest difference was I couldn't go back to acting like I didn't know what was going on in this country anymore. I couldn't act like I didn't know who I was like everyone else, because I had actually been back to where my father came from and where my bloodline comes from. So I can't act that way anymore. I can play like I don't, but I'd be only lying to myself. Now, those aren't his words verbatim, but that's essentially what he was saying, that now that I've gone and I've seen and I've experienced, I can't act like that didn't happen anymore. So there was a growth there. And one of the very interesting things about being human is we do get comfortable where we are. And the only time you're going to grow is when you're uncomfortable and you can't go back. And you have to figure something else out. The hermit crab lives inside of a shell. And now that shell is hardened and it doesn't grow on its own. So as this crab grows, his shell becomes tight. And eventually, this crab has to cut himself or herself out of their shell and then risk, now I don't have any protection from predators until this shell grows back. Just like certain aspects of being human beings, there are times where we are forced to be uncomfortable, to grow, forced to grow. And like the hermit crab, if you don't, well, you'll only suffer. And I like to think that the second you get to that uncomfortable phase and you turn back, that's when your suffering starts. Right? Because when you get to the door of that next phase, of that next stage of your life, and you decide to turn back and say, I'm just going to stay here and play it safe. Well, you know what you have to do to get to the next step. You've seen it. You learn what you had to do, but you're scared to take the next step. And so you begin to suffer. And that could be in bad relationships. That could be in a crappy job that you have, or just a crappy life that you're currently living. And you're just deciding to, I'd rather not deal with the unknown. I'd rather not deal with being that uncomfortable and having to find my way again. I'd rather just stay here where it's safe and play it safe. But in all life, being uncomfortable is always going to be your form of getting better. And the genesis of life, not from the beginning of time, but when you're born crying. Most babies are born crying. And even before that, women are in labor, right? So to put the suffering aspect back into perspective, well, when a woman goes in labor before she has her child, I mean, she can act like she doesn't want to have the baby. But when that labor kicks in, you just want to get it out, right? So that's that uncomfortable moment that's forcing you now to graduate to the next stage. And sometimes you will meet people in life who are so comfortable being where they are that when you start talking about getting ready to go to that next stage, most likely they won't come. And sometimes they can't come because maybe they were what's holding you back. That happens all the time. We have good friends back home where we come from, or I've been in this neighborhood all my life and I don't want to live away from my friends or my family. And then so you won't progress because of your comfort with your friends and your family. But your friends and your family don't necessarily tell your story. That's up to you. However you live your life, however you choose to live your life. Now, your friends aren't going anywhere. Your family isn't going anywhere. They'll always be there. And we have modern technology like phones, internet, Skype. We can do many different things to reconnect with our families again. But for some reason, many of us want to stay around our families and not grow and not be better than who we were in the past. And then we start to suffer in our lives because we saw a better life and we decided not to take it. A famous saying and quote that I love to say is, you're always one decision away from living a completely different life. What's holding you back? What decision are you not willing to make yet? And who is it on? It's not their role to make you make a decision. 9 times out of 10, it falls in your lap to make this decision on being better, getting better. So get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's where growth happens. And every once in a while, you will stop and you'll look back over your life and see the growth from where you were to where you are today. I hope this podcast is very helpful to you, and thank you for listening.